Come on, baby, light my fire.
Can you imagine never being able to hear your favorite song again? There was a time when playing a song could feel like committing a small act of rebellion. Tracks that didn't get played at certain hours, that some DJs avoided, and that because of it became unforgettable. They weren't banned because they were dangerous, but because they said things a lot of people preferred not to hear. Today, we're going to remember those songs they tried to silence, and understand why the more they hid them, the louder they rang in our memories. 14. My Generation by The Who. It was 1965. Young people in England were starting to get tired of adults telling them how to dress, how to think, how to live. And as if they could read their minds, The Who released this song. Roger Daltrey, barely 20 years old, deliberately stuttered while he sang. That halting voice hit British society like a punch on the table, and because of it, the BBC banned the track almost immediately. They claimed it might offend people with speech impediments, but everyone knew the real reason. That stutter sounded way too much like someone high on amphetamines, the infamous Purple Hearts that were circulating among young people at the time. What few know is that the stutter wasn't Daltrey's idea, it came from bassist John Entwistle, who suggested it sounded like someone so furious they couldn't get the words out right. That contained rage, that generational scream, defined everything that came after. An entire generation found its anthem in a song the older folks didn't want them to hear. Before we continue, we'd love to get to know you a little better. Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. Let's keep going. 13. School's Out by Alice Cooper. Summer of 1972 arrived, and with it a song that became the battle cry for millions of students around the world. Alice Cooper, with his dark makeup and theatrical presence, sang what every kid felt when the school year ended. But there was something deeper, something that worried parents and authorities alike. School's been blown to pieces, the lyrics said explicitly. Several radio stations decided not to play it. Parents' groups protested. School principals called it an incitement to rebellion. Here's a detail you might not know. The track was almost called something else. Cooper originally considered different titles, but when he heard the final melody, he knew it could only be about one thing: the end of classes and freedom. The curious part is that Alice Cooper, born Vincent Fernier, was always a straight-A student. His persona was pure theater. But for those of us who grew up with that melody, it represented something real. The promise that one day we'd walk out of the classroom and be free. Hit that like button if you love rebellious songs like this one. 12. The End by The Doors.
Come ride with me.
Jim Morrison closes his eyes on stage at the Whiskey A Go-Go in Los Angeles. What comes out of his mouth that night would change rock history forever. That night, the Doors were fired from the club. The song was banned from practically every radio station in the United States. Parents called it an abomination. Morrison had taken Freud's Oedipus complex into popular music territory, and the world wasn't ready. What most people don't know is that the original version lasted barely 5 minutes. It was during the recording sessions when Morrison was in an altered state of consciousness that he improvised the section that stretches nearly 12 minutes on the album.
It hurts to set you free.
Producer Paul Rothchild later recalled that the studio lights were off. Morrison almost always sang in complete darkness. When he finished, there was total silence. No one knew what they'd just witnessed. but everyone knew rock had changed forever. 11. War Pigs by Black Sabbath.
Evil-minded plus destruction.
4 working-class kids watched the news about Vietnam with a mix of horror and rage from Birmingham, England. That same day, Ozzy Osbourne, Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward decided they had something to say about it. That's how War Pigs was born, a song that compared political leaders to evil sorcerers, sending young people to die while they stayed safe in their offices. U.S. radio stations in the middle of the war considered it unpatriotic. In the UK, the BBC severely limited its airplay. But here's something you might not know. The track was originally called Walpurgis, with direct references to Satanism. The record label forced the band to change both the title and parts of the lyrics, deeming them too controversial. The irony is that the final message ended up being even more powerful. It no longer talked about the devil, it talked about something far more terrifying. It talked about real men with real power making decisions that cost real lives. 40 years later, Black Sabbath's creation remains painfully relevant. 10. Cocaine by Eric Clapton. It was 1977 when Eric Clapton, one of the world's most respected guitarists, recorded a melody that would haunt him for decades. The title left little to the imagination. Radio stations banned it immediately. People pointed to it as a glorification of drugs. Authorities held it up as an example of everything wrong with rock music. But there was something almost no one wanted to hear. The song wasn't Clapton's, it was by J.J. Cale, an Oklahoma musician who wrote it as a warning, not a celebration. Clapton always insisted the lyrics were anti-drug, that they explained the worst of that world from the inside. Another thing few know, Clapton recorded it during one of the darkest periods of his own battle with addiction. That's why the lyrics were almost a public confession, a cry for help disguised as a catchy melody. The irony is that those who banned it never bothered to really listen to what it was saying. Sometimes, the most misunderstood songs are the most honest. 9. Rape Me by Nirvana. By the 90s, grunge was taking over the world. Kurt Cobain had become, much to his dismay, the voice of a generation, and when he was at the top, he decided to release a song with an impossible-to-air title. MTV initially refused to play the video. Radio stations wouldn't even consider it. The title alone was enough to rule it out without hearing a single note. But those who took the time to really listen discovered something completely different. The song was an anthem against rape, a cry of resistance, a declaration that no abuse can destroy the human spirit. The reality is that Cobain wrote the lyrics thinking about how the media had raped his privacy after the success of Nevermind. He felt used, exposed, violated by the fame he never wanted. Less than a year after releasing it, Kurt Cobain was gone. The track remains one of his rawest testimonies and also one of the most misunderstood. What other band song do you remember? Drop it in the comments. 8. I Want to Break Free by Queen. Freddie Mercury appears on screen wearing a leather skirt, black wig, and mustache. He's vacuuming. In Britain, everyone got the joke it was a parody of Coronation Street, the country's most popular soap opera. The British laughed, and the song became an instant hit. But on the other side of the Atlantic, the reaction was very different. U.S. networks refused to air the video. The conservatism of the Reagan era had no room for men dressed as women, even as a joke. Queen, who had filled stadiums in the United States, saw their American career collapse almost overnight. What's fascinating is that the lyrics spoke of freedom in every possible sense.
Break free.
Freddie Mercury, who kept his sexuality private, was singing about breaking chains no one could see. In countries like South Africa under apartheid, the song became a resistance anthem. The same work, completely different meanings depending on who was listening. That's the magic of music they tried to ban. 7. Break On Through by the Doors.
You know the day destroys the night. Night divides the day.
The Doors appear again on this list because from the beginning they always stood out for controversy. In January 1967, they released their first single, a song that promised to break barriers, cross limits, reach the other side. But there was a problem, a line that said, "She get high."
Break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other.
For radio stations of the era, that phrase was too obvious a drug reference. The solution was brutal. They cut that part of the song. For years, radio listeners heard a mutilated version where Morrison simply sang and the phrase hung incomplete in the air. The irony is that Jim Morrison always considered this his least controversial work. For him, it was a metaphor for spiritual enlightenment, for awakening consciousness. Here's something you might not know. The opening bass line was inspired by Brazilian bossa nova. Ray Manzarek became fascinated with South American rhythms during a trip and fused them with rock in a way no one had tried before. Censorship turned a song about spiritual awakening into forbidden fruit. And we all know what happens with forbidden fruit. 6. God Save the Queen by Sex Pistols.
God save the Queen! The fascist regime!
It was June 1977, the year England celebrated Queen Elizabeth II's Silver Jubilee. 25 years on the throne. Everyone was happy. Everyone except 4 kids, creating a genre from the ground up, daring to call the regime fascist. The BBC banned the song immediately. Record stores refused to sell it. Major retailers pulled any Sex Pistols material.
There is no future in England!
But something extraordinary happened. It reached number 2 on the official charts. Many, including the band itself, always believed it was actually number 1. But the figures were manipulated to avoid the humiliation of an insult to the monarchy topping the charts during Jubilee celebrations. The consequences came fast. Band members faced physical attacks because of this song. Johnny Rotten was stabbed in a parking lot. Paul Cook was attacked with an iron bar. Still, banning the track did nothing except make its legend grow bigger. It proved no power is big enough to silence an idea. 5. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds by the Beatles. Sgt. Pepper's hit the stores a true masterpiece, and among its tracks, one stood out for reasons John Lennon never anticipated. The title's initials spelled LSD. To censors, the song was clearly promoting lysergic acid. Radio stations in several countries banned it without hesitation. Lennon spent the rest of his life denying it. The real story, he said, was much simpler and more beautiful. His 4-year-old son, Julian, came home from school one day with a drawing. It was his classmate, Lucy, floating among stars and diamonds.
Taxis appear on the shore, waiting.
Lennon took that childlike image and turned it into one of the most surreal and beautiful songs ever written. What's touching is that Lucy, the real girl, was identified years later. Her name was Lucy O'Donnell. She stayed friends with Julian Lennon until she passed away in 2009. Her name caused one of the Beatles' most controversial songs, and at the same time, one of the sweetest. 4. Another Brick in the Wall by Pink Floyd.
You don't need no education.
While progressive rock bet on strong messages and sharp guitars, Pink Floyd only needed a children's choir to make education systems around the world tremble. Just saying, "We don't need no education," was enough for many radio stations to avoid playing it. But in South Africa, it took on a completely different meaning. The apartheid government banned it outright. They considered it a subversive anthem inciting black youth to rebel against the segregated education system, and they were right to fear it. It became a flag for the South African student movement. It was sung at protests, written on walls, a cry for freedom no band could silence. Here's the curious part about this hit. The children who sang on the original recording were students from a school near the recording studios. They never got paid for their participation, just a copy of the album and a day off school.
All in all, it's just another brick in the wall.
Years later, after legal action, they finally received compensation. The irony of exploited children singing against educational exploitation didn't go unnoticed by anyone. Subscribe to the channel if you want a second part of this video with more band songs. 3. Light My Fire by The Doors.
Come on, baby, light my fire.
We have to keep talking about the Lizard King and his band because, despite the years and the hits, they were never free from censorship. In 1967, The Doors received an extraordinary invitation to perform on The Ed Sullivan Show, the most important TV program in the United States. There was only one condition. They had to change a line from their biggest song where it hinted at wanting to get higher with a girl. The producers feared that phrase referred to drugs. The band agreed. During rehearsal, they sang the censored version without issue. Everyone was satisfied. But when the cameras started rolling live, Jim Morrison looked straight into the lens and sang the original lyric. The producer, Bob Preck's expression was caught on camera for history. The Doors were never invited back to the show. That moment defined an entire generation's attitude. The censored lyric became the one everyone wanted to hear. And The Doors went from being just another band to becoming a symbol of artistic resistance. 2. Let's Spend the Night Together by the Rolling Stones. Obviously, talking about censorship also means talking about the Stones, who more than once had to face the media, and even Ed Sullivan himself. In January 1967, the band arrived at the Ed Sullivan Show studios with their new single in hand. The title left little to the imagination. Sullivan was clear. Either change the lyric or don't play. Mick Jagger negotiated, argued, until he gave in. During the live broadcast, when the crucial verse arrived, Jagger sang, "Let's spend some time together," instead of "Let's spend the night together." But he did it, rolling his eyes so dramatically that everyone understood the message. Censorship was a farce, and Jagger proved it on national television. You probably remember it wasn't the first time the Stones faced censorship on the program. Years earlier, they'd been forbidden from singing Satisfaction with its original lyrics. The tension between the band and Sullivan was legendary. The host considered the Stones absolutely detestable, but his ratings skyrocketed every time they appeared. Money, in the end, always speaks louder than morals. The Stones knew it, and they played that game better than anyone. 1. Killing in the Name by Rage Against the Machine. When we thought censorship was a thing of the past, it came back hard in the middle of the 90s. Back then, 4 musicians from Los Angeles released a song that would become one of the most powerful protest anthems ever recorded. The message was direct, no metaphors, no subtlety. Some of those that work forces are the same that burn crosses. That line says it all. The lyrics denounced institutional racism, police brutality, the hypocrisy of power. And then came the ending that said straight out, "Fuck you, I won't do what you tell me." It was repeated 17 times, each one more intense, until it exploded in a scream of fury that no radio station could broadcast. It was banned from practically every commercial station. But here's something extraordinary. In December 2009, an internet campaign got the track to #1 in the UK during Christmas week, beating the X Factor winner. It was a collective act of rebellion. Thousands of people bought the song simply to prove corporate music doesn't always win. 17 years after its release, Killing in the Name was still as uncomfortable as the first day. And that, perhaps, is the greatest compliment a banned song can receive. And that's the end of this journey. I'll leave you here with a video of another oldies playlist if you want to keep the nostalgia going. See you next time.